In Lecture 1, When Demand and Supply Changes, our first lecture of our second part of demand and supply, we're going to be looking at the demand curve and specifically how our demand curve may change or shift over time. So just going back to our previous module, when we started to build our supply and demand curve, we talked about the law of demand, and we stated that the law of demand was other things equal. As the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases. So this inverse relationship between price. We could also add in, as the price decreases, the quantity demanded increases. And that was our law of demand, talking about the relationship of a given product, the price of a product, to the quantity that consumers want to purchase. And then we talked about the law of supply, and this other things equal, as the price increases, the quantity supplied increases. And so a direct relationship here, and we could add in, as price decreases, the quantity supplied decreases, but showing the relationship between the price of a product and the willingness and ability of suppliers to produce that product. And so we've only focused on the price of a product. So let's assume that we're in the market for apples, and we talked about, as the price of apples changes, how do consumers respond and how do producers respond by changing the quantity that they demand or quantity that they produce. Now in this module, we're going to focus on the other things equal. What happens when we change the other things equal? And we're going to see that this is going to change the demand curve. We're going to move the demand curve. Instead of moving along the demand curve as price changes, we're going to move the demand curve completely to a new location. And on the other hand, when we're thinking about the supply curve, we're going to move the supply curve to a completely different location. But what are these other things equal that shift our demand curve and shift our supply curve? And that's exactly what we're going to focus on in this lecture. All right, so when we have an event that's going to change the equilibrium, there's a few things that you have to ask yourself. And so the first thing is, does this event first impact demanders or the producers, sellers of the product? Okay, so it's going to be really easy to second guess yourself here. And so what I want you to do is really think about, who does this first impact? And so it's really easy to say, well, producers are going to produce more because buyers are going to want to buy more. Well, the first thing that happened is buyers want to buy more, and then the producers responded. And so make sure that you're really thinking about what happens first, okay? Who is the first mover? Who wants more? Who wants to produce more first? Okay, then we determine if this event is either going to increase or decrease either the demand or supply. So whatever we answer to number 1, is it going to make these producers or consumers want to purchase or produce more or less? And so that's the next question we have to ask ourselves. Then we're going to draw out the graph, and this is very important. It's easy to skip this step, and when you do, it's easy to make mistakes. To be honest, I still draw out the graphs. It's so useful, incredibly important to draw out those graphs, so then you can determine what happens to the equilibrium price and what happens to the equilibrium quantity. Okay. One of my old professors of econ once told me that this lecture alone will teach you how to read the Wall Street Journal and apply that knowledge that you have. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, so that you can read the newspaper and understand what are the consequences for each event that's occurring. And you're going to start doing this. You do this a lot subconsciously, but what we're going to start to do is look at this in terms of, okay, what does this actually mean for our economy and the markets that we participate in? All right, so let's look at our first example. New medical evidence reports the consumption of apples reduces the incidence of cancer. And so what I did here is I highlighted in red and italicized the word where we're thinking about which market. Okay, so new medical evidence reports that the consumption of apples reduces the incidence of cancer. And so how is this going to impact the market for apples? So I want you to think about that. Do you think that all of a sudden it's going to change the demand for apples or the supply for apples? Well, it's really easy to say, well, it's going to increase supply because there's going to be more people who want to buy apples. Well, what happens first is more people want to buy apples. And so it's the demanders that want more initially, right? They see that apples have this extra health benefit, and demanders are going to be the first people to act, and this event will increase demand. Okay, this event is going to want to increase our demand curve. And so what we have here is our initial price quantity equilibrium. Okay, and I just denoted our initial equilibrium price as P and our initial equilibrium quantity as Q. All right, so now we know that people are going to want to demand more apples. And what this means is it's not just they demand more apples at our equilibrium price, but they demand more apples at all price levels. And so what we're going to see happen in our economy is we're going to see that demand curve shift to the right. And now we have a new demand curve that's demand 2. Okay, so now we have a new demand curve, demand 2, that we're going to experience. And we can forget about that old demand curve. That old demand curve doesn't exist anymore. Okay, but sellers are still charging that equilibrium price. So sellers are still charging the equilibrium price even though the new demand curve is right here. All right, so what does this mean for the market? It means that we're going to see that the quantity demanded, which is right here, is greater than the quantity supplied, because our supply curve has not changed in this example. Okay, so what we have here when our quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied, we have a shortage. So quantity demanded is out here, quantity supplied right there, and to deal with our shortage, we know that the price is going to have to increase. And as the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases, the quantity supplied increases until we hit our new equilibrium, which is at the intersection of our only supply curve and our new demand curve. And this equilibrium, what happens to the equilibrium price? Our equilibrium price has gone up, and our equilibrium quantity has also increased. Okay, so as a result of an increase in demand, a shift in the demand curve to the right, we see that initially there was a shortage, and to deal with that shortage, we see prices increasing, and as prices increase, the quantity demanded starts to decrease, the quantity supplied starts to increase, and we meet in the middle with an increase in the equilibrium quantity. All right, so we see, to answer that last question, price is going to go up, equilibrium quantity goes up. All right, to deal with that increase in demand. All right, and what we call this is a preference. There's a change in the preference of buyers. So what other things changed? The other things that changed was now people prefer apples at greater rates than they had previously. And so, since that's the case, the demand for apples has increased. We've seen this in other areas over time. As the DVD is invented, people no longer prefer video cassette tapes, VCRs. They no longer prefer those, and so the reverse in that case would happen, where there's a decrease in demand. And so you have to think about preferences, and as preferences change, if something becomes very popular, the demand is going to increase, and as people decide they don't like that product anymore. In our next example, we have a state changes their laws to require motorcyclists to wear helmets. How is this going to impact the market for helmets? All right, so the first thing, does this event impact the demanders or the producers? It's easy again to say, well, suppliers are going to have to produce more helmets because buyers are going to have to purchase them if they want to ride on a motorcycle. What happened first? Well, buyers have to purchase the helmets. They have to want to purchase the helmets. And so the first thing we see is that demanders will want more. Demanders are the first actors here, and this event is again going to increase the demand for a product. All right, and so we're going to have a very similar situation. We have our initial price, our initial quantity. We see that our new demand curve, will come out here to the right of our old demand curve. There's an increase in demand. There are now more buyers who are going to demand this product at each price level. And since that's the case, initially we're going to be charging our equilibrium price. Here is our quantity demanded. Our quantity supplied, our supply curve hasn't changed, and so our quantity supplied is back here at our initial equilibrium quantity, and what we experience is a shortage. And with all shortages, we start to see the price increase. As it does so, the quantity demanded starts to fall, the quantity supplied starts to increase, and we reach our new equilibrium price. That's higher than our old equilibrium price. Our new equilibrium price is higher, and our new equilibrium quantity is also higher. The equilibrium quantity has gone up. So what will happen to equilibrium price? Price has gone up because now more buyers are in the market. And what happened to quantity? Quantity also went up because there's more buyers in the market. There are more buyers who are willing and able to purchase this product at all price levels. And what we're talking about here is the number of buyers impacts the demand curve. The number of buyers is another one of those other things equal. And so other examples might be, as our baby boomers in the United States start to get older, there is greater demand for things like assisted living and neighborhoods that are primarily devoted toward older adults. And so what we see is greater demand for those, causing us to see more neighborhoods, more nursing homes pop up. The prices of those products are starting to increase, all to deal with this increase in demand. Okay, increases in demand cause the price of the product to increase and the quantity of the product bought and sold in the market to also increase. All right, let's look at another one here. The United States enters into a recession. How will this impact the market for air travel? So we're looking at the market for air travel, so buying airplane tickets, that market. So if the United States enters into a recession, how will that, so a recession, we're thinking about a decrease in income for most individuals. We're thinking about uncertainty on whether or not they're going to have a job in the future. How will this affect the market for air travel? Well, again, it's going to affect the demand side. Okay, so the demanders are the first ones to respond. So it's consumers that are experiencing a reduction in their income. They're not going to necessarily have the money or the safety net that they had before. They might not get as large of bonuses at the end of the year. They might be worried about their job. And so consumers really feel the brunt of the recession first. Then how will they respond to air travel? Well, it's likely that during a recession, they're not going to use as much air travel. We're going to see less air travel in terms of people taking vacations. They might not have the money to do so. They might be worried about their job, and if they take a vacation, it might not look as good. They might be the first person to be laid off, and so demand is actually going to decrease in this case. All right, and so let's take a look graphically at what a decrease in demand will look like. So we have our initial supply and demand curve again. In this case, we're going to see demand shift to the left. And I guess I want to really explain why we're seeing that demand curve shift to the left. So when we see demand decrease, it means it's decreasing at all price levels. So let's look at this price here. We have a price here, and initially, the quantity that was demanded at this price, and let's say this is the price of a $200 ticket somewhere, and it had, let's say that there were 100 tickets bought and sold at that price. But now, not changing the price at all, All that changed was now we're in a recession. Now instead of 100 tickets being bought, or 100 tickets being demanded, now there's only 50 tickets demanded. And what about at the equilibrium price? At the equilibrium price, consumers were wanting to purchase this equilibrium quantity. Now they want to purchase, and it looks like I somehow fell really close to that 100 mark. So instead of that equilibrium quantity, now they want to purchase only 100 tickets. Again, less than before. And let's look at even a price that's really low. Let's go down here and let's say that that price is maybe $50, a $50 ticket. The quantity demanded previously, everybody wanted to go on a vacation, was really high, and now that quantity demanded has fallen, and it's fallen to our equilibrium quantity there, whatever that is. Okay, and so we can see that at all price levels, that quantity demanded has decreased. It's shifted to the left. The reverse would be true if we shifted that demand curve to the right. All right, so let's draw on that demand curve again. So we have that D2. And what has happened in this case? So we're going to keep our supply curve exactly the same. We were at our initial equilibrium. Now we forget about that that normal D curve. That doesn't exist anymore. Let's cross it out. That doesn't exist. Our new equilibrium is down here. But the price is still relevant in the market is that equilibrium price. So this is still the price where consumers are purchasing their product. And we can see that the new demand curve, this is our new quantity demanded. Our supply hasn't changed, so the quantity supplied is still the equilibrium quantity, but now the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. And when the supply is greater than the demand, we call that surplus. So now we have a surplus in the market, and how do we eliminate that surplus? We start to reduce the price. And as we reduce the price, more buyers enter into the market. A few of those sellers leave the market, and we start to see the price fall. So we see a lower equilibrium price than we had initially, and we see a new equilibrium quantity that is less than our initial equilibrium quantity. So when we have this demand curve decrease or a shift in the demand curve to the left, we see that price has decreased and quantity has decreased. So the decrease in demand has caused that price to fall, and as price falls, we start to see some of those sellers leaving the market, and it's going to cause our overall quantity bought and sold in the market to decrease. All right, so when we have that decrease in demand for an event such as a recession, okay, when we start to see incomes change, and we have what we call a normal good. A normal good is a good that as income decreases, the quantity demanded for that good will also decrease. And as income increases, the quantity demanded for that product will also, that's a Q, will also increase. And that's what we call a normal good. So a normal good is almost every good. They use normal for a reason. So as our income falls, we purchase less. As our income increases, we purchase more. So something like a computer or iPhones, a lot of goods are going to have that normal good status. Hamburgers, we can think about the food market, hamburgers, steaks, chicken breasts, grocery items like fresh fruit, all considered to be normal goods. Clothing, normal good. Now let's look at some goods that might not be normal. All right, so ramen noodles. So same event, the United States enters into a recession. How does this impact the market for ramen noodles? Well, again, it's consumers that feel the brunt of the recession. They're the ones that don't have as much income. They're the ones that are worried about their job. And so we see, again, demand is going to change. And in this case, when I don't have as much money, I'm going to increase my consumption of ramen noodles. And again, I'm going to increase it at all price levels. So when we start to look at our supply and demand curve, what we see is that outward, that rightward shift in the demand curve. It's at all price levels. It doesn't matter if a package of ramen noodles costs 25 cents, if it costs 50 cents, right? At 50 cents, I used to consume this quantity, now I consume more. At my equilibrium price, I used to consume this quantity, now I consume more. And even if it was 5 cents, right, I used to consume this amount, this quantity, and now I consume more. And so we're going to see at all price levels, we experience that increase in demand. All right, let me clear this quick, and let's draw that in one more time. We have an increase in our demand curve, shifts that demand curve out into the right. Our old price is still the price that's present in the market, and now the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. Our old demand curve doesn't exist. We still have our same supply curve. And so what we see here, the quantity greater than the quantity demanded greater than the quantity supplied, and we have a shortage. There's more people in line to buy the product than there is product available. Price starts to increase. It causes the quantity demanded to decrease, the quantity supplied to increase. Our new equilibrium price is above our old equilibrium price. Our new equilibrium quantity is greater than our old equilibrium quantity. So price has increased, quantity has increased. All right, so in our last example, we were talking about normal goods. So the relationship between income and normal goods. And we said as income increases, we purchase, the quantity demanded for normal goods increases, and vice versa. The relationship between income and something like ramen noodles is going to have the opposite effect. And what we call these are inferior goods. An inferior good is a good that as income increases, the quantity demanded of this product is going to decrease. All right, so I want you to think of how much ramen noodles you eat now, or think of something else that you might purchase that you would consider to be an inferior good. And since you're a college student, right, we don't have as much income as we hopefully will after we graduate. And so after we graduate, our income's going to increase. Can you think of some goods that you may decide not to purchase anymore as your income increases? So something like ramen noodles would be a very good example. All right, what about something like Starbucks lattes, right? As my income increases, I'm going to decide to purchase more of those. That's going to be a normal good. As my income increases, the quantity I demand increases, and so we see that demand curve shift to the right. All right, so when we have that normal good, our income increases, demand increases, we have that right shift in demand. When we have an inferior good, our income increases, we don't purchase any more ramen noodles, and that's going to cause the demand to shift left. So these are demand shifts. All right, so on normal good, we see income and the demand moving in the same direction, and income in an inferior good, income and quantity, our income and demand will move in the opposite direction. Okay, so as we move into a recession, we're going to purchase more of our inferior good. There's that indirect relationship, and as a result, price and quantity will increase. All right, what about the next example? The price of Bounty paper towels increases. How will this impact the market for store brand paper towels? All right, so what we see here is I'm walking down the aisle. I usually buy Bounty paper towels. All of a sudden, the price increases of Bounty paper towels. How will this impact not the market for Bounty paper towels? Because in the market for Bounty paper towels, what's happening is we just have that demand and supply, and price isn't here, it goes up, and now it's up here, and that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the store brand, another brand of paper towels. And we've already talked about this in terms of monopolistically competitive market, many substitutes or brands. So as I'm walking down the aisle, I see that Bounty paper towels have increased, and as a consumer, that's going to affect my decision on what to purchase. And I'm actually going to increase my demand for other paper towels as I see one brand increase in price. And what these are is they're going to be substitute products. Because I don't need to purchase both Bounty paper towels and store brand paper towels. I only need to purchase, I need to buy 1 4-pack of paper towels. Which one am I going to purchase? If I purchase Bounty, then I don't need the store brand. But as the price of Bounty paper towels increase, it makes those store brand paper towels more attractive. So I used to be willing to pay more for the Bounty paper towels, but now that increase makes those store brands even more attractive. And so my demand for those store brand paper towels is going to increase. And as it has in all cases, it's going to increase at all price levels. And so our new demand curve shifts out to the right. We can look at our new equilibrium, forgetting about that old demand curve. We didn't change anything to do with supply. Our new price is higher, and our new quantity is also higher. A higher price, more quantity, because we have an increase in the price of a substitute. Okay, so as the price of a substitute increases, then the demand for the other good or our initial good is also going to increase. So we're not talking about the market for Bounty. Okay, this is the market for other brands or our store brand. The other brands, we're going to see an increase in demand. Not as many people are going to be willing to purchase those Bounty paper towels at that higher price, so they increase their demand for that substitute product, that substitute in consumption. All right, let's look at the opposite event. The price of iPhones increase. How will this impact the market for iPhone cases? So we're not talking about iPhones again. iPhones, what we see is just an increase in price, and we're going to move along that existing supply and demand curve. We're going to be up here for whatever reason, and that's not going to be the case. But what we really want to focus on is, what about those iPhone cases? All right, so for iPhone cases, if the price of the iPhone increases, maybe more consumers are going to purchase Android products. And what that means is there's going to be fewer consumers in the market for iPhone cases. So again, it's going to be demand that's affected first. And yes, suppliers might respond by producing less because they know fewer people are going to have iPhones. But the first thing that happens is people buy less iPhones and they need fewer iPhone cases. So demand decreases in this case. And what we call something like iPhone and iPhone cases, we consume them together. And so they are going to be complements in consumption. So complements in consumption. So our previous example, we were talking about substitutes. If I didn't buy Bounty paper towels, I was going to need to purchase a different brand. These two products I consume together. So another example, hot dog and hot dog buns, right? I consume them together. If the price of one changes, my consumption of the other is going to change. I consume them together. So we consider them to be complements in consumption. And so we can draw this out again, but more importantly, we're going to talk about just a little bit more on our production, our complements and substitutes in consumption. All right, so as demand decreases, our equilibrium price decreases, our equilibrium quantity decreases, and due to that leftward shift in our demand curve. All right, so again, when we're thinking about complements, as the price of one, I'm going to say of good one, and that's the iPhone, as the price of the iPhone increases, then what happens to the quantity or the demand for cases, and we'll call that good 2. As the price of iPhone cases increases, the demand for iPhone cases decreases. All right, and that's because our iPhones and our iPhone cases are complements. All right, let's again talk about our iPhone cases increasing in price. What about the demand for Android phones? So if iPhones increase in price, there's going to be some consumers who decide, okay, that price is too high, and the quantity that they demand starts to decrease, and instead of purchasing an iPhone, they purchase an Android. And since these are substitutes, Androids and iPhones, then the demand for Android phones increases. So price and demand, when we're thinking about complements and consumption, are going to have inverse relationships. Price and demand, when the two goods are substitutes, are going to have direct relationship. As the price of the iPhone increases, the quantity I demand is going to decrease, and that's going to cause me to switch to an Android. And as I purchase fewer iPhones, I'm not going to need an iPhone case anymore, and so the demand I have for iPhone cases actually falls. Right, so make sure you can identify, if you're talking about two different goods here, and you see two different goods, identify the relationship. Are they complements in consumption? Are they substitutes in consumption? And we're actually going to get to production as well, so that's going to be important as well. But what's the relationship between these two goods? And then think about, if the price increases for the one good, how is that going to affect my behavior as either a consumer or a producer? And again, we're going to get to the producer one in our next lecture. All right, so the price of gasoline is expected to increase this weekend. So I expect that the price of gasoline is going to increase this weekend. Well, I'm going to fill up my car today, right? If I think that the price of gasoline is going to increase this weekend, then I want to fill up my car today. So what do? Again, we see that demand curve shift outward. I increase my demand today. I experience a higher equilibrium price and a higher equilibrium quantity. We forget about our old demand curve, and we only have our new demand curve and our old supply curve, and that intersection is what's important. So price increased, quantity increased. All right, and so expectations of both future prices and future income become very important in looking at our demand curve and where it falls within the realm of the market. So if we expect prices to increase in the future, then my demand today will increase. But if I think the price of gasoline is going to fall this weekend, then I'm going to wait and purchase my gasoline this weekend. What about if my income increases? If my income increases today, or if I expect my income to increase, if I expect that I'm going to get a new job, or I expect to get a bonus, then my demand for normal goods is going to increase. My demand for those inferior goods will decrease. And if I expect my income to fall, if I expect there to be a recession, if I'm worried about my job, if I'm not sure that I'm going to have a job next week, then my demand for normal goods falls, and my demand for inferior goods will increase. All right, so again, dependent on if those goods are inferior or normal. All right, so let's do a little bit of a refresher here. Factors that shift the demand curve to the left or decrease demand. So why might our demand decrease? First, the good falls out of style. It's no longer popular. If a good is no longer popular, we're going to see that demand curve shift to the left. At all price levels, there's a decrease in the quantity demanded. There's a decrease in the number of buyers. So the number of buyers entering into the market starts to fall. So this might be due to something, people get sick and die. There's a black plague that hits the world. Or maybe there are fewer people even in the country So we could think about a lot of people leaving the United States, or a lot of people leaving some of those countries in the Middle East where we see war-torn countries. There's a drastic decrease in the number of buyers. This is going to shift the demand curve to the left. If income falls and we're looking at a normal good, so a normal good is a good we like to consume, and if our income falls during a recession or we lose our job, we're going to purchase fewer normal goods at all price levels. The reverse is going to be true for our inferior goods. As our income increases, we purchase fewer of our inferior goods, and that's going to cause our demand curve to shift to the left. The price of a substitute good falls, or the price of a complementary good increases. So as substitutes in consumption, as that price falls, and so our example we looked at was Bounty, and if suppose the price of Bounty falls, and we're going to see demand for those store brands actually fall as well. However, if we're thinking about complementary goods, if the price of the iPhone increases, we're actually going to purchase less, or our demand is going to decrease for those iPhone cases. All right, and if there's the belief that future price of the good will decline, or if we expect our income to decline in the future, that's also going to decrease our demand today. All right, on the other side of the board, we have factors that shift the demand curve to the right. And these include if the good is currently in style. So if it's popular, if everybody's wanting it, it's trending, that's going to increase the demand for the product. An increase in the number of buyers. So if all of a sudden there's more people in the market, as our baby boomers get older, or we're going to see more consumers purchasing products that older individuals want. As income rises and we have a normal good, or as income decreases and we have an inferior good. So income matters in that demand curve, but first identify what type of good we have. The price of a substitute good increases, or the price of a complementary good falls. So let's think about that iPhone. As the price of the iPhone increases, we're going to purchase more Android phones. If the price of the iPhone decreased, we would purchase more iPhone cases. And also those future prices and income are also going to matter. All right, so what we looked at were the changes in demand. In our next lecture, what we're going to focus on is going to be supply. But before we get there, I want to circle back to one point. The price of oranges increases. How does this impact the market for oranges? Does this impact the demanders or the producers? Well, it's going to impact both. But remember, what does the law of demand tell us? The price, as the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases. And so when we're looking at our graph and you just see a statement like the price of oranges increases, how is this going to impact the market for oranges? So as the price increases, we can see how this would affect the demand curve. So our new price is up here. And it's not that the demand curve shifted, it's just that the quantity that we're consuming falls because we moved along our existing demand curve. When we're talking about the price of the good in the market that we're analyzing, that represents the law. It doesn't represent the other things equal. Okay? Changing the price of the product is not changing the other things equal, it's only changing the quantity demanded or the quantity supplied. And so we can also see here that as the price increases, the quantity supplied increases, but what's not happening is a shift in either one of these curves. We're just moving along an existing curve. To see a shift in the curve, we need to experience a change in these other things equal, that we can see the differences right here in this table.